Did you hear that?
Yep.
Okay, floor is yours.
Okay, so my name is Kelsey. I'm in recovery. I will have 7 years next month. Life for me growing up, I was raised LDS. I was born in Ogden and I was adopted right from the hospital. My mom was only 15 when she had me, so she chose to give me up for adoption. I grew up in Huntington, and if you don't know what that is, it's close to Price. It's right in the middle of Utah. Like I said, I was raised LDS. I had a lot of childhood trauma. I was sexually abused for years, domestic violence. The church contributed to my trauma as well. And so it definitely wasn't easy for me growing up. I know that for some people hearing that, like I'm adopted, so I was supposed to be given a better life. And my parents did the best they could with the knowledge that they had, so I don't blame them for anything, but it definitely wasn't easy growing up. um, I got in an accident when I was 15, and I rolled a side by side and it cut my friend's leg off. It was hanging off by 3 inches of skin. And like they found 3 inches of bone at the site, and it was really gnarly. That's my first experience with pain pills. I just got bumps and bruises, some torn muscles, but that was my first experience with painkillers. And I'd had the dare classes or whatever, but nothing ever specifically said, hey, if you ever get prescribed this by a doctor, you must be careful. It was just, don't take that little pill or that little baggie that someone gives you on the football field. It didn't get that specific. So then a year later, almost to the day, about a month off, I got in another accident and we rolled a truck 5 times front over end. It was me and three of my friends. We collided with another friend on a motorcycle, and to try and miss him, we rolled. My high school sweetheart was crushed. He had his ribs stab him in the lungs. I had my foot cut open and it got severely infected. I was on crutches and IV antibiotics every morning at the hospital for a few months. And so then I got more pain pills. And then so did my high school sweetheart at the time. And so we were both abusing them. Our moms, or my mom and his sister thought they were regulating it, like, okay, honey, it's 5 hours. And we were cheeking it and then taking them all at once later. So that's when of course, I didn't realize it then, but I think that's when my true use started using, even though, or started happening, even though I wasn't using on a regular. I knew I liked it, I knew how to abuse it, and I thought about it all the time. So my senior year of high school, um, my friend who was a leg my friend who almost lost her leg in that accident with me, she transferred to my high school because we went to different high schools, and she had an old pill bottle from back in the day. Oh, sorry, I don't know why something's beeping. Um, Let me go fix that. My son said hi.
Okay,
Okay, so
yeah, just pick up. We can edit also.
okay.
It's not a big deal.
So she transfers to my school, and I remember the first day of my senior year, we were so messed up on the field trip that day that I don't even remember most of it because we started taking her pain pills. So that was about 16, 17 years old. 18, I turned 18, I graduated high school, and that sheltered LDS lifestyle just had me run for the wind the second I graduated and was 18 and had my own freedom. So I immediately got in with the wrong crowd. I met the father of my children at 18, just about a month after high school, and I got pregnant right out the gate. And then right before I got pregnant, he had introduced me to heroin. So I started doing meth and heroin with him. I stopped while I was pregnant, thankfully. I know that a lot of people aren't able to do that. And I pass no judgment to those who weren't able to. But so after I had my son, then I got pain pills again. And then it was downhill from there. I started doing them all the time, and eventually I started using needles, and it just progressed and progressed. And then around 23 years old, I got arrested. I had been doing so much criminal activity, and little did I know I was being watched the whole time, and I just didn't know it. And so I got caught robbing a hotel, not by gunpoint. It sounds super cool, like like I was of some kind of not cool, but like some kind of badass. I like went in and robbed. No, I just walked in the front desk of a hotel and took the money in the drawer. And I got busted. Me and my ex-husband ran from the cops, and they caught us. I went to jail, and that's really the turning point for me. Well, the beginning of my turning point, I'll put it that way. So I went to jail. I was detoxing. I was going through absolute hell, and then it came down to um, my kids. The DCFS decided to take them away, and as I'm in jail with a clear mind for the first time, I realized that I had overdosed in a bathroom with my daughter in the other room. Like I had every reason for them to take my kids away from me. I was not a fit mother. So the plan was that DCFS was going to give them to my parents and they were going to be with kin. Well, we got to court and they totally caught us off guard and said, no, they're going to foster care. And I even just talking about it, I get this heaviness on my chest. I get this lump in my throat. That was the worst day of my life. I remember because court was just on the phone. They didn't take me to court. So I listened to this and I got back to the pod right after, and reality just hit me. I remember this wave of heat coming over me. Like I felt my ears get hot. I felt my face flush. It dropped me to my knees. And every once in a while I was in jail, every time I thought about it, I would get that rush over and over. It was absolute hell. And I remember calling my dad afterwards too. And that was the first time I ever heard my dad cry, is when they took the kids away. That was the first time I ever heard my dad cry, and that tore me up too. So that was the actual turning point right there, is my kids. I wasn't doing it for me yet. I didn't want to do it. I was like, that's all I was thinking about was I just want to get out and get high. No, you can't. And it was just this back and forth battle. And so I got offered the opportunity to do drug court, which scared the crap out of me because I was an entitled, spoiled little brat. And I knew that being on drug court meant I had to work 40 hours a week. And to me, that was the crazy, scariest thing about drug court, as silly as it seems. But my drug court experience was not easy. I was quite a turd for a while. I wasn't using or anything, but I just wasn't going to therapy on time, wasn't being accountable, had every excuse in the world for the judge, missing UAs, even though they were clean. And so through all of that and some, how do I put it? Rural area justice systems are much different than the larger areas, especially when you have a big brother that gave you a bad name first. And so my probation officer didn't like me. My tracker didn't like me. My lawyer had came out of the drug court staff at one point and said, girl, they are just out to get you. So like you hear all the time, well, people say, well, it was the judge or it was this. No, some crappy stuff really did happen to me when I was in drug court that truly was unfair and unjust, that kept me in it a little bit longer. But part of it was that I was just a shithead. So I spent 3.5 years on drug court, but I'm grateful for that because this is why I talk so much about like Red Barn and the Other Side Academy, because they're 2-year plus programs. The longer you're working your program, whatever it is, the more successful you're bound to be. And I am one of the only ones who successfully is still in recovery after drug court. Most everybody I know either relapsed and didn't get better again, or relapsed and then got back into recovery. But I believe that because I was on it first, and I'm not saying I'm any better than them. I'm not. This is my story and my route, but I just believe that spending that long was more effective than spending just like the 18 months on drug court. My therapy really helped me a lot. I wish I would have had some peer support, because it came more peer support. Peer support came in at the very end for me. And that was like really super helpful. Looking back, I don't know how I did it without peer support, because it is so crucial and so important. And maybe I would have made better choices and not have been such a shithead if I had someone there with me saying, hey, I've been there, done that. So that's what got me actually managing my recovery and staying in recovery as I was in drug court, and only because the rules and restrictions are so strong, that's what really kept me going. You can't afford to slip up on drug court. I mean, you've got a curfew, you drug test almost every single day in the beginning, and I had some hefty prison time over my head, and I'm actually really thankful for those things because as much as I knew I needed to get my babies back, that willpower some days wasn't always there. But my fear for jail and prison was. So I'm actually grateful for it. Um, and then I had an awesome support system. I had my family. I had thankfully my kids ended up with amazing foster parents that I still have a relationship with today. And so through all the support I had, I was able to be successful. Okay, but then I graduate drug court, and every everything, all that support besides my family just drops off. No more DCFS, no more drug court, no more treatment. And it was also during COVID. So I had gotten laid off from my job because of COVID, and I got super, super depressed. I gained 90 pounds. I was almost 300 pounds when I moved up here 2 years ago. So, and that's where I'm getting at is the moving part. So I spent a year just being at home, being depressed, gaining weight. I was in an abusive relationship. My ex-husband was drinking, holes in walls, broken doors, that kind of thing. And then everybody around me that was in recovery with me slowly started dropping off one at a time, one at a time. And I knew that you are most like the five people you spend the most time with, and all my friends are relapsing. My husband was abusing me. There was nothing. I felt like my life was just absolutely out of control, and I was like, I know if I don't get out of this, I'm going to relapse, like it, or I have high potential for relapse. And I think no matter how long you're in recovery, it is important to be mindful. I don't believe in once an addict, always an addict. And that's why I don't introduce myself as one either, because if you, this is how my mentor LT puts it, is if you're a plumber for 20 years and then you retire, are you a plumber anymore? No, I've got 7 years in recovery. I'm not a drug addict anymore. Um, so I call my biological dad, who lived in Ogden, and I tell him what's going on. And I'm like, my ex-husband's drinking, uh, everybody's using. I don't know what to do. And he said, well, just come up here and you can live in my camp trailer. And I said, I have one out right now. I have one option: stay and see what happens to my sobriety, which I don't play with, or go live in my dad's camp trailer. So within 3 days' notice, I told all my friends and family I'm leaving. I took up my kids, I left my ex, and I just moved 2 hours away, 2.5 hours away. Um, that was like the one of the hardest times in my life. Like I literally thought, like, because not only is like a breakup hard, but then I'm away from my parents for the first time in my life. I've never lived in the city. I'm a small town Southern girl. Like we got our first light when I was 22 years old. So to come up to Ogden is like a culture shock. And I quite literally thought I was going to die of emotional pain. And um I got through it somehow. I got through it. I ended up getting a job at USARA, and things have just flourished since then. I did end up getting back with my ex. Unfortunately, it's just part of the cycle. I got back together with him for a little bit, and we said, oh, we got it this time. Let's get married. And so we got married and separated 4 months later, and so but ever he went to jail in April, and cut that part out. I don't need to say his business. Can we cut that part out? I don't want to spill his business. Anyways, so ever since I moved up here, though, I got a job at USARA. They offered me a forensic position, which meant working in the jail with inmates. So I did one-on-ones with inmates, and I had group did groups with them, and sorry, one of my children just walked in and distracted me. Uh, So I loved that job. It meant a lot to me, but it got to the point where they were like, you only need to do stuff that has to do with jail. You only can be in the jail. No recovery meetings outside of the jail. You don't need to do anything besides what is here. And to me, that was taking away my recovery community. Absolutely not. The opposite of addiction is connection. And I cannot be taken away from my recovery community. And so I ended up leaving. I love you, Sarah. Still part of their family. Nothing personal. It was more on the jails end of things, the way they wanted things ran more than you, Sarah. So I ended up leaving, and during this time, this guy LT comes to USARA one day and comes to the office and for a meeting, and he sees that I got my camera there with me, and he's like, "Oh, you're into photography." And I had been as a teenager, but I was using for all those years. So I'd finally bought a new camera and picked it up and was trying to learn. And he's like, "Well, I have RA Studios. Why don't you tag along with me and learn some stuff?" So I tagged along, and this is my favorite part of my recovery story. Little did I know, sitting on that couch with LT that day, that him and his family and RA Studios was going to absolutely change my life. So I get involved with him. I'm shadowing him for about a year. And then one day we're actually filming at USARA. And I just get this urge and I go up to him. I'm miserable at the new job I have after USARA, which was a recovery place in Brigham City. And I didn't like it. I didn't feel good about it. And so one day after the shoot, I walk out to LT to his truck and I say, "You pay me enough to pay my rent and I'll quit everything and put my time into the studio." And he said, "Bet." So I quit. It was a huge risk. I quit everything. And this was around the same time that Dominic came into my life. He's my boyfriend now, and he's God's blessing. Like he's amazing. I don't even have words to describe it. Like he has came into our lives and loved us and supported us and changed our lives for the better. And I don't know if I could be doing what I'm doing right now if it wasn't for him. He's so supportive and amazing. But now I just have poured my life into recovering addict. I eat, sleep, breathe recovering addict. And this is a even funner part about my story is everybody recovering addict is Christian, and I was not. When I began, I was into witchcraft and crystals, and LT would tease me and say, "You and your rocks," and I'd be like, "They're real," and he'd read me Bible verses and I'd be like, "Whatever, boss," and he never pressured. He never said you need to be a Christian or anything like that. So he plans this big bike ride. I'm sure a lot of people saw it on the internet when it was going on. And during that bike ride, it was like 3 o'clock in the morning. He was at 250 miles. And I just, for the first time, prayed hard, like actually meant it. I'd been praying and trying to learn and asking him questions, but I was still full of doubt. And that was the first time I actually really said, if there's a God out there, this is when I need you the most, And the next morning I woke up, I opened this little book. Oh, I have it right here. I opened this little book and it just reads these little passages for every day of the year. I read the passage for that day and I just felt this rush go over me of love and peace, and I was saved. And that was about a month ago, and between a month and now I'm a completely different person. So to go back to when I began my recovery, I call them kind of checkpoints. I began here and then things got worse here and things got better here. I would definitely say meeting LT and then being saved were two major turning points in my recovery. And I know I need God in my life now in order to maintain the recovery for the rest of my life. And I think it's been one of the most beautiful moments in my recovery, for sure, is being saved. And the day I got my kids back was, I mean, I can't even explain how happy I was. Terrified, I'd never actually parented before by myself, but those were the two turning points in my recovery. And even though I'm 7 years, almost 7 years in right now, I don't think that it ever ends, right? Because even if you're not recovering from drugs in the moment, like now that I'm in a healthy relationship, I have healthy people around me, I feel safe and loved. All this stuff from the past that I thought didn't matter kind of comes chasing after you a little bit, and you just got to you're always recovering. Whether you did drugs or not, there's always something to recover from, and it's ourself, and it's the things of the world and the things of the flesh, and there's always something to recover from. But even when there's times that's painful, even when there's times that are hard, it's all for a reason. It's all part of God's plan. And I'm thankful for the hard times because the good times are even more beautiful. So,
How can people find Recovering Addict?
so you can find Recovering Addict at recoveringaddict.org. We hold groups Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. The first hour from 6 to 7 we exercise, and then from 7 to 8 there's group after, and that is located at 155 14th Street in Ogden. And then you can also follow Leonard Weaver and Kelsey Pierce on Facebook to follow all the Recovering Addict fun and shenanigans. We're always talking about recovery. We're always talking about God. And we're there to support people. And on top of that, our TikToks are Recovering Addict and Your Soul Mama on TikTok if you want to follow us. So,
And what does Recovering Addict do? How does Recovering Addict help people in recovery?
so Recovering Addict is peer support based. We are super um we value peer support a lot. It's one of the most effective, is the most effective form of support during recovery. And so everybody that leads the group, like LT, I guess that's everybody. LT is peer support certified and relapse prevention certified. So it's a group that offers you peer support and relapse prevention at the same time. And we also focus on body, mind, soul. So we don't just focus on um, drugs. If you have a porn addiction, a sex addiction, if you struggle with food, whatever it is, we're there to help you heal all the way around. Everybody is welcome.